thank you all for joining us. I think normally I would start a Q&A talking to the director, but in this case, I think I'm going to start with Samy, because you originated this screenplay before Todd got involved. Is that correct?
That is this one on? Okay.
Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah, I wrote this as a spec.
Well, can you say a little bit more about the origin of the screenplay and what interested you originally in this story? It's so complex and there's so many different amazing layers and strands and moods to the final piece. I'm just always interested what the original spark was.
Yeah, I feel like the original spark was this character of Joe, of being this idea of a man in the situation being 36 and about to be an empty nester, a person that hadn't really had any time to process what happened to him and the sort of media blitz that followed, and the heartbreak of that. So that was really the first kind of spark of the idea that made me feel I really wanted to write it.
And then Jessica, you are the next piece in this puzzle, I think. So maybe you can talk about how the script came to you and what sparked your interest in it.
Yeah, so a friend and our agent, Blair Cohan, sent it to me and just said, you've got to read the script immediately. I think you're going to love it. And I did, and I was so drawn to the complexities and remember closing it not knowing how I felt, which I loved so much. And then Will read it, and we were like, we would love nothing more than to meet Samy and hopefully get the opportunity to work on this with her, which we did. And then next came Natalie and Sophie.
So how did that happen?
Well, Jess sent it to us and really, loved it at first sight. Really felt like it was a very unique, original script that we rarely read. Something is good. And Natalie, thought, we talked with Jess and thought that, we needed to have an incredible director, and Natalie thought of Todd, sent it to Todd, and that's how Todd and Killer then joined the team.
So Todd and Killer. I mean, I think it's unusual for you to come to a project this way, if I'm not mistaken, meaning something that someone sends you that you didn't originate. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that and what your thought process was in deciding that this was something you wanted to take on.
It actually started a while ago with the script of Carol, the whole project of Carol, the price based on Patricia Highsmith's novel, The Price of Salt, which had been kicking around for like almost 20 years in development. And that was a project that came to us through very close dear friends of ours who had inherited it as producers in the UK. And before that, I had adapted, this was just my own decision with my writing partner, John Raymond, Mildred Pierce from the James M. Cain novel. And that was my first episodic, to date, small screen project. So I've been moving in the direction of trying out different methods of how to find material. And of course, even the films I've written and developed myself and researched often come from other sources and are ways of interpreting the histories around artists and musicians or works by filmmakers like Douglas Sirk. And so I've always felt like I've been an interpreter of existing languages in film and in culture. And Wonderstruck was a script that came to me, and Dark Waters was a script that came to me, and the Velvet Underground documentary I had done last was something that was suggested for me to do, and it was again a completely new territory for me, and an extraordinary thing to play with. We were cutting that in the height of COVID when this script came to me. A lot of scripts were circulating during COVID, because everything was shut down and everybody was speculating what to do next. And Natalie and I had discussed other projects in the past, so there was an interest on both our parts to try to find something that we could do together. But this script was something else, and left an impression on me that stayed with me. And we started to talk about it right away, Natalie and I, and share notes, and then talked to Samy and met Samy, all of course remotely. And then really the whole way the film got turned into a real production happened very quickly, and with a lot of moving parts and suddenly opening up and aligning, brief moments of freedom for me and the two actors that we jumped on last year.
So maybe, Killer, you can talk about some of those quickly moving parts. I mean, was there anything especially urgent or surprising, like how you decided where to shoot?
Yeah, the location was a big inflection point, actually. Sammy's original script was set in Camden, Maine. And of course, pragmatists that we are, there's not a tax credit in Maine. So a movie like this, which is made 100% independently, needed to consider that.
And it had to be set in May.
That's
We
right.
couldn't do in the fall when
Right.
we all were
In
free.
May.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the weather and then, as happens when Todd gets his fingerprints all over something, the kind of creative values of something start to immediately emerge. And Savannah, Georgia became a great idea. And we sent Todd and his team down there, and they kind of fell in love, and we built the production plan around being able to shoot in that place. So that was one of those moments where we're like, okay, we locked in a plan, now we just got to move to grab the actresses' availabilities.
But it was really, I think, over 4th of July weekend where we began the weekend trying to figure out how to fit the movie into Natalie and Julianne's schedule at the very end of the year, and what kind of compromises that would bring in terms of weather. I mean, we were literally sitting there going, how long are the leaves on the trees in Savannah? And who can tell us for sure? And all of those things. And then there was a giant schedule change for Julianne that flipped everything back around, literally from one day to the next. And we really got what we wanted.
Well, we're glad, because then we got this movie. I want to come back just to what impresses me so much about this film is that it's functioning on so many different levels, and somehow they all manage to be in perfect harmony. I'm not sure you can articulate, but I want you to talk about some of those, the different moods that the film is playing with, the resonance between those different moods.
It started on the page. It started with this dedicated sense of discomfiture that Samy protected in the writing, a slight distance and a refusal to sort of form moral opinions about the characters or redeem either of the female characters in the course of the film. And I love that. Natalie loved that. And when we shared it with Julianne, she loved that. So for me, the task was to try to find a visual and stylistic language and a series of tonal decisions that would give the viewer a comparable place to interrogate what they were watching. But I also felt it was really important, because I felt that on the page, and I really loved that about it, that there was an element of pleasure in doing so. It made you uncomfortable every page. But there was an excitement about interrogating yourself as you read it, right? And I wanted that to be an experience for the viewer. And so there were just a few things, and I don't know how much we want to get into all that stuff now, but there were a few decisions that helped me to start to set in place some tonal ideas, and it had to do with the music, it had to do with the very restrained camera. It had to do with looking at movies that I immediately thought of, like films by Bergman, in particular Persona. But bringing to all of that a different kind of mischief, I think, in the way the audience might be able to navigate it, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly what I would like you to just dig in a little more to those decisions, since we have a couple minutes. That was what that question was for. Yeah.
Like I said, look, when I read the script, and some of this we've talked about, and some of this we haven't, so it'll be so fun to finally have her on board with us. This is a very exciting day for us, and to have Samy with us, and you know, it helps us a little bit with the grief of not having the actors with us. But I read that monologue of Elizabeth toward the end of the movie, and I immediately thought of the scene in Bergman's Winter Light, where Ingrid Thulin delivers a letter to the lens of the camera in a black and white, in the film that's shot in black and white, in a medium shot against a neutral background. I remember seeing it when I was in high school and being completely riveted by the performance. It's an unrequited love letter to the priest character in the movie. And I love the movie, but it was the performance, but it was the simplicity and austerity of the shot that made such an impact. And I thought, I have to do this movie, if only to shoot that monologue that way. And then it was a series of, sort of as can be the case in your stylistic searching, for how to justify that. What would be the tonal language that would make that work and have that be meaningful? And of course, there are all these scenes in mirrors. And it's about an actor studying a subject and learning how to become and interpolate that subject and internalize that subject, and that strange process and that creepy process that goes on between the merging of the two women. And of course, Persona is another seminal text for the female mirroring story. And there are moments, even though they're not necessarily played as mirrors, where the two women ultimately do turn their gaze to the lens of the camera. And Bibi Anderson or Liv Ullmann, I can't remember who, because they are already blurred by this point, brushes the hair slightly off the forehead of the other. And of course, these were ideas that also circulated in the film. And it just sort of went from there, where I thought of this stationary restrained camera that had that sense of observation. And around this time last year, the movie The Go-Between by Joseph Losey from 1971 played on Turner Classic Movies. And it's a film that I remember I think I'd seen when I was a kid. But it had fallen out of circulation. I feel like I hadn't seen it in so long. And the score by Michel Legrand in that film is an astonishment. It slaps you in the face from the very first opening credits of the movie, and you are on alert, and in the most exciting way. And it's a pastoral coming-of-age story of a boy who goes to his rich brother's family's country house for the summer and develops an infatuation with his beautiful sister, Julie Christie, and so forth. In a way, the score feels almost more outside the eventual plot of The Go-Between than even the sort of complicated moral background of this story. But I loved how it put the viewer in a state of active reading of the film, in a sort of mysterious, ominous, investigatory state, almost like the one that Elizabeth undertakes as an actor. And so we worked with this music. We used it in the pre-production of the movie. We used it while shooting the movie. We used it while cutting the movie. Until finally I came to Marcelo Zarvos, my composer, and said, Marcelo, I think we gotta try to use this music, man. It is baked into the DNA of the film and the way the film seems to be working for the people we've been showing it to. And so, but then he took it up, he made it his own. There was other temp music that we'd thrown in there, and Marcello rearranged the entire score and wrote original music for it, and we re-recorded it all from scratch. So I had the amazing Marcello Zarva score, but I also was able to retain the powerful musical signature from Michel Legrand.
Now I just have to ask a follow-up question of Samy based on that, because since Todd keeps saying that all these different levels were in the original screenplay, I'm wondering if you had similar touchstones in terms of how you were thinking about those moods while you were writing the original screenplay.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the tonal mix of humor and real genuine sadness and heartbreak. I feel like some of the humor is kind of intentionally, it's so uncomfortable that it breaks the tension. It's needed. And then some is more, I don't know, maybe acerbic, dealing with this actress coming to town and the Hollywood machine of it, and the satire of that. But yeah, that's what I am interested in as a viewer and everything.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to open it up to your questions. Well, we'll start with, yes, you.
I was wondering, how did you approach seeking truth in this film and its sort of fuzzy, murky qualities?
I don't know if I ever do seek truth in the film, or if the film is ever truly enlisted to provide it. I think more questions are raised about how we go about the industry of making truth. Who is enlisted in that process? How partial vision this notion of how sort of precious a vision of that is, how much we all kind of think, oh yeah, man, the truth, yeah, let's all get there. But really, the questions that are behind that are really important ones. And there's something really curious that goes on in the sort of power dynamic between these two female characters, where one comes with all of this privilege and power from without, from the Hollywood machine industry, and these notions of truth that we all nod to, benignly, and who seems to be investigating and finding search at any cost, to the point where we're like, wait a minute, she went that far? Where are her limits? But then there's a character in Gracie, and of course you're comparing the two women throughout the course of the film, but there's a character in Gracie for whom not looking at things is a source of resolute survival, and she is quite outspoken about the fact that insecure people are very dangerous. I'm not insecure, meaning I don't question anything that I've done, or at least that's the armor that she holds up. And so when you sort of think that the person who has all the power and is knocking down the lies and getting to the truth is the one who's ultimately going to, quote unquote, win, you ultimately see how that sense of refusal to look at things plays a contrary, countervening, power against the former person. And all of this you're negotiating in your head as you watch the film and as you read it. But none of it would have made possible without this sort of collateral damage of Elizabeth's breaking through. None of this would have enabled Joe to have the potential of looking at himself in ways that were just not allowed for all these years. And so, and that clearly, as Samy has described, is the character with whom we feel the most hope. We look at the kids with hope. There's a chance that some of these folks are gonna survive this. And I think part of it is the contradiction or the dialectic of this truth versus resistance.
Uh-oh, dueling hands, but you were first in the blue, yeah.
Hello, I'm Ben from People Magazine. Congratulations on the movie. My question's for our screenwriter here. Obviously, it's a work of fiction, but we know people will compare this to the real-life story of Mary Kay Letourneau. Did you research that case at all when writing this? When did you start writing it? And yeah.
Well, I started writing it in 2019, and I really wanted a fictional story that dealt with this tabloid culture of the 90s that has kind of seemingly bled into this true crime biopic world we're in right now, and kind of question that transition and why we want to keep recreating these stories. So I think that was the real jumping off point for me.
But did you follow that Mary Kay Letourneau case as it was happening? You seem like you're too young.
I'm a baby, so actually I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, yeah, all of these kind of stories like this that are in the ether, yeah, are, you know, just completely embedded in, I think, everyone's like cultural history.
Okay, we have time for one more. We'll take this right in the front row right here.
I think you created the most fascinating lisp in film history. This performance, how it comes and goes and moves from one to the other. Please tell me about the lisp.
I did not create the lisp. There are some people who are missing today who could speak so beautifully about how they built these characters. And of course, Julianne, we shot this movie in 23 days in Savannah with very limited resources. And that meant there was no rehearsal time and that's, you know, that schedule's unusually short, but the fact that there isn't rehearsal time is not unusual in films I've made. But it meant that the burden on Julianne Moore to completely come up with the specificity of Gracie was enormous, because we started shooting in the house scenes right away. And things like the wigs, which had to be made in advance, were decisions we'd all been very much a part of, and planning and discussing and all that. And the way Elizabeth's hair would change a little in style to match the Gracie wig. They both wore wigs. But down to the cadence and her manner of speech, these were late in the. These were. I mean, Julianne and I talked about it, and yes, there were. To be honest, there were things in a kind of loose upper palate that we did find interesting in Mary Kay Letourneau's speech. That was a kickoff for her, and she took it further. And also this idea of how does this kind of original relationship occur? What is the myth these two people tell each other about the roles they're playing? And she's not a pedophile, this woman. She doesn't have a history of like going after every little teenage boy that walks by. There's something very specific that happened between these two people. But it's enshrouded in a fantasy, which is that she's the princess that needs to be rescued from the domestic tower, and he's the young virile knight, you know, almost like a Greco-Roman young knight, you know, who's going to come in with all this sexual virility and power and beauty and save her. And so she plays the little girl, And it inspired aspects of the clothes and the manner of speech and the color palette, and all these things helped us to sort of understand how this happened, or the delusions that helped produce it.
Well, thank you so much. Looking forward to tonight. Before you leave the stage, if you guys could all just stand up so they can take a quick photo of you.